This episode is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Go to cardkingdom.com/studies to purchase all your favorite Magic cards of the deep cut trivia variety. This video showcases 50 such cards. Perhaps a few of them will catch your eye and inspire a new deck. Mishra is calling. Thanks Card Kingdom for the support. I'm a proud member of Team BASILISK, an esports organization on a mission to inspire scientists through the study and play of difficult games. By cultivating our curiosity in Magic, we learn and grow in our lives. That is the goal of our partnership. Thanks, Basilisk, for the support. UFO 50 is a video game comprised of 50 smaller video games. It released on September 18th, 2024, and it's been on my mind as a paragon of scope. It is ambitious, yet contained, a micro vision of a macro space, like the 1 to 1200 scale panorama of the city of New York. Every game in the collection, like every building in the model miniature, is independent and individual, yet when assembled together, they become marvelous in their relationship to the whole. In thinking and writing about Magic for the past 12 years, I've come across countless cards that represent full-length research projects all their own. I've gathered some of them here. For the moment, they will remain at flyover distance, suggestions of stories, synopses instead of chapters or books. In these trivial facts and anecdotes, we find glimmers of our history and our culture, windows into the game that is a hobby that is a lifestyle, and the elusive lifelong endeavor to know and understand it in its totality. Without further ceremony, here are 50 Magic cards about everything and nothing. The Tarrasque is Magic's take on the monster of the same name from Dungeons & Dragons, which itself is an homage to the Tarrasque of French mythology. In the medieval era, a dragon-like beast was legend to stalk the river Rhône and destroy passing boats near the town of modern-day Tarascon. Over the centuries, the creature became an effigy of processionals and festivals in the town. Philip Berberon's illustration reminds me of the colors and shapes of the architecture in southern France. Maybe that was intentional. Aurelia's Fury was selling for $35 around the pre-release of Gatecrash. Within 2 months, it fell to less than $10 and has never demanded a double-digit price tag since. Aurelia's Fury is testament to our inability to judge cards in a vacuum, no matter how flashy they may appear, and no matter how smart the writers and speculators and pro players may be who are singing their praises. Do you remember that one episode of Walking the Plains where Nate Holt interviewed that guy carrying around a binder full of giant sharks?
How many giant sharks do you think you own?
Upwards of 300.
Do you remember the guy who was sent mystery mail from Troll and Toad containing 950 of the same card?
Did somebody send me $200 worth of giant sharks? Am I a majority shareholder now of giant sharks?
The anonymous package contained a single message. When Dryad Arbor was reprinted for the first time in From the Vault Realms, it was reformatted from the Future Sight frame to the modern 8th edition frame. For all intents and purposes, it looked exactly like a basic forest, especially in the text box, and was often treated as such in tournaments.
Swing with just those guys, yep. So I don't think he sees the Dryad Arbor here.
Yeah, it's a bit of an unusual situation. Of course, the Future Sight version of Dryad Arbor, very, very clearly an unusual card. This one, much closer to simply looking like a forest.
UX design guides and encourages patterns of behavior, and this one brought out the worst in players looking for soft edges and gray areas to exploit in games. Dryad Arbor has never been reprinted with the giant mana symbol since. Fibblethip the Lost, by definition of his type line, is a homunculus, whose etymology leads to some deeply strange wiki articles, like this one on Preformationism, and this one on Cartesian theater, and this one on Skarbnik. Sometimes looking up Magic cards will leave you lost in some weird places indeed. Experimental Frenzy confirmed the existence of coffee on Ravnica. Years later, Alison Lures canonized the drinking of iced coffee topped with sweet cream on Tarkir. Delicacies always taste better in our imaginations through the wondrous medium of fiction. The original painting of Dan was stolen from a collector's parked car in Seattle, Washington on April 19, 2013. Its whereabouts remain unknown, if it still exists at all. Way back when Elder Dragon Highlander was still a nascent sideshow at big tournaments, and EDH Rec a distant pipe dream, Mishra Artificer's Prodigy was the ultimate anti-commander, a legendary creature whose only ability conflicted with the format's singleton restriction. To put Mishra in your command zone was a fashion statement, a signal to the other players at the table that you had cracked the impossible code. As a nod to an era before homogeneous deck building, I invite anyone to brew a Mishra deck without looking up the combo pieces. It's a cool challenge. The flavor text of Oblation reads, "A richer people could give more, but they could never give as much." I think this line has usurped Rancor and Company as my favorite poetic insight in Magic. I think about it all the time. The original sketch of Coiling Oracle labeled the creature Manaconda. Maybe this was its playtest name, or maybe it was Mark Zug's own interpretation, but either way, artists tend to leave breadcrumbs of insight into the creative process that is concepting Magic cards. Nowadays, you'll occasionally find these clues in hyperlinks or in file names on websites. Mask of Riddles has been printed exactly twice. The first time was in Alara Reborn in 2009, and the second time was in the Obscura Operation Precon in 2022. What's remarkable is both cards feature the same illustration by Matt Cavada. It depicts an artifact that could have been pulled straight from the New Capenna World Guide, but was printed 13 years prior to the plane's conception. Whomever collated cards for this deck has a keen eye for continuity and a deep visual memory. If you're building Goblin Charbelcher in Legacy, remember to include a single foil copy of Stomping Ground in Russian to send a message. And that message is, "Revised Taiga is $350, more than 5 times the cost that it used to be for this punchline to resonate." At the beginning your end step, draw a card. Conspiracy Take the Crown's the Monarch token shipped with the tiniest of typos, but one that was magnified and framed as a slipping standard of quality control. In retrospect, this error was a bellwether, a marker of the last time that all of us were reading every line of every card together with scrutiny. It would be 4 years until we received a second printing of the Monarch that would fix the omitted preposition. At Pro Tour San Diego in February 2010, Wizards of the Coast gifted 6 custom-made Magic cards to the riders of Robot Chicken who attended the event. Hugh Sterbakov confirmed the card's validity to the public, and in 2021, John Ray, a former show writer for the TV series of Lilo and Stitch, auctioned a copy to the Misprints and Oddities Facebook group. In an FAQ Google Doc, Ray stated that he was friends with some of the Robot Chicken guys himself and occasionally played Magic with them. He also showed off a second copy in his possession, leaving the locations of the remaining 3 up for question and their owners anonymous. Every time I see Dragon Lord Silumgar, I think of this hilarious back and forth between Andrei Strosky and Shota Yasuoka from the semifinals of Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir.
So there is the Dragon Lord. Away goes Icefall Regent.
But speaking of Dragon Lords,
I would like.
I would like an 8/8
It
trap
is
one.
so good. I'd like one.
Yeah, but what about this?
Wow.
So it's not as much of a blood as you might think, because you have to sacrifice the one that comes back in there.
And give it right back now, you bad not control player.
The hottest new game, Dragon Ball.
The last 5 spells that went in the stack were dragons. The last 4 were Dragon Lords.
I tell you, aggro on aggro
Last
doesn't
6
look this
spells now.
fast. Oh wow!
The dragon counter is dinging like a Vegas slot machine right now.
That's the game.
Everything that got cast was a dragon or referred to a dragon. That's all that happened.
That's one to watch back in a few years' time and go, remember DTK? Goodness me.
You know, before Tarkir, we made our own nicknames for the Wedge trios. Most folks stuck to the color acronyms, with Blue, White, Red and Bug being the most prolific. Junk became a derivative of Jund to describe decks with white instead of red. The real sickos, however, looked all the way back to Apocalypse for guidance. Dega Disciple is a point of reference for anyone who refused to learn that white, black, red was now being shorthanded to Mardu. Assuming the 4 of limit didn't exist, a deck with 60 Chancellors of the Dross and nothing else would win every single game before your opponent even took their turn. That is, unless your opponent also had the 60 Chancellor deck, in which case the upkeep triggers would go on the stack and those of the non-active player would resolve first. There is a Spanish version of the 4th edition foreign black border Sarah Angel with Amy Weber's illustration of Time Elemental in the blue card frame. It is among the most widespread misprints in Magic history. Some joke that this is the only biblically accurate depiction of the character. Hundred-Handed One provides the perfect measure of whimsy in Magic. The design is based on the Hecatoncheires of Greek myth, giants with 50 heads and 100 arms that helped Zeus overthrow the Titans. The card takes itself seriously. It's a clean idea with normal rules text. There's just something so funny about giving a single creature the ability to block an additional 99 creatures each combat. Oh, and it also gains reach. I don't know, this is a very subtle humor that I think we've lost touch with over the years. Every time I see an 8th edition Urza's Mine or Tower or Power Plant in white border, I think of the tiny way a single fingernail can crease the edge of a card sleeve for inconspicuous gain, and in effect, what it means to lose everything. I speculated that Asmorano Mardicadiced Akuldakar was secretly an anagram and spent 2 months untangling it into a somewhat incoherent sentence. In April 2023, Usersaurus commented on my video with a solve of their own, one that makes much more poetic sense. A dormant Dracula is Romania's cicada. This island from the Cold Snap theme decks depicts the exact same illustration by Anson Maddox as this snow-covered island from Ice Age. As far as I know, this is the only case of Magic breaking its rule against reusing the same painting on 2 mechanically unique cards. Honestly, what are the odds that Space Godzilla Death Corona would arrive in conjunction with a global pandemic of partially the same name? Then again, imagine if it was printed 3 months earlier. In classic EverQuest, the God of Fear Kha'Zix Thule dropped an item called Amulet of Necropotence, which, when clicked, instantly transformed its wielder into a skeleton, a nod to Mark Tadin's iconic illustration. It's been cited that many of EQ's early devs played Magic in the studio and looked to their cards for design inspiration, or in this case, explicit reference. The same is true for Hidetaka Miyazaki and his teams at From Software. Of all the Magic cards that share DNA with the Souls games, I can't help but think that Stephen Belladin's Wasteland was a guiding light in building the lands between. The cathedral crumbling into the edge of a cliff, the shape of which mimics a king's crown sinking into the earth, matches Elden Ring's melancholic atmosphere and central themes, namely the slow decay of order into entropy and the self-destructive nature of hubris. To date, there is exactly 1 card that has ever been printed in Arabic, Odyssey's Stone-Tongue Basilisk. I wanted to hear the text read by a native speaker, and a couple of kind folks volunteered to help.
باسيليسك الحجر واللسان.
حينما يقوم باسيلسك الحجر واللسان بتوجيه ضرر قتالي لمخلوق آخر،
قم بتحطيم هذا المخلوق المضروب عند نهاية القتال.
الحد
على جميع المخلوقات القادرة على سد هجوم باسيليسك الحجر واللسان عمل ذلك.
لديك الحد طالما وجد 7 بطاقات أو أكثر في مقبرتك.
Sometimes I wonder how many spells Archaeomancer has recurred in its 12-odd years of being a Magic card. I wonder how many times it's won the game. I wonder how many total instants and sorceries we've brought back from the depths collectively as a community. I wonder if someone is casting Archaeomancer right now as I speak, and later as you watch. There will come a time that someone casts the last Archaeomancer ever, and what a thought. Ashiok Wicked Manipulator has too many fucking words on it. I'm not reading all that. I'm never gonna read all that. On April 9th, 2015, Reddit user Jobs141910 requested that someone drive to Channel Fireball's 2 brick-and-mortar stores in Santa Clara, California, buy out all of their copies of Seance, and destroy them on camera. 2 days later, the same user extended the offer to anyone willing to participate in the effort online. 8 months after that, they put up 90.5 Bitcoin, which is roughly $100,000 today, to any player willing to pilot a Seance deck at the Pro Tour. Although Jobs141910, now nicknamed Seance Guy, was active in threads and even took a formal interview with Sam Tang on Kitchen Table Magic in 2017, they have never publicly stated their reasons for conducting this experiment. On January 4th, 2023, a mysterious collection of 10,000 plus seances resurfaced for sale on Facebook Marketplace in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, reigniting tales of the urban legend once more. I contacted Jobs141910 a while back to no response, but if you are watching, I want to talk to you. Remember when magic made you feel like a wizard casting spells? Yeah, I remember casting Albert Einstein. Arabian Nights was never meant to have basic lands, and yet this mountain exists. From an article titled Arabian Nightmare written January 6, 1994, we learn that Dave Howell, the production manager for Magic at the time, suffered setback after setback while finalizing the card files for the game's first expansion. This saga lives up to its title. Arabian Nights was an absolute mess of development, and given the glacial communication technologies of the early 90s, it's a miracle the set shipped at all. In essence, the mountain slipped past Cartamundi's cross-checks in Belgium, landed on plate 1A, the only one that printed properly the first time, and was never removed despite Howell's request. As an added bonus, the end of this article also details how that scimitar became Magic's first expansion symbol by virtue of a fax machine that saved the entire operation in the 11th hour. For a while, Armor of Thorns from Mirage had an invisible mechanic called Substance that effectively did nothing. Mark Gottlieb created Substance in 2005 to clarify the timing of delayed triggers in Magic Online, but it was rendered obsolete 5 years later with the Magic 2010 rules changes. For the full story, I invite you to watch Melvin MTG's wonderful video on the subject here.
What's happening here? Why is all that mana tapped?
Oh my. Chromanticore comes into play, bestowed onto an already terrifying Soul Flare. It's currently a hexproof, indestructible, flying first strike, vigilance, trample, lifelink, 8/8.
Chromanticore fucking rules, man. What an awesome Magic card. Shout out Jamie Park for bringing this pile of shit Magic deck to the Pro Tour. You offered a King's Feast to one of my favorite creatures ever made. The illustration on Shriekmaw was originally intended for Aethersnipe. It depicts an elemental of undoing and forgetting. The illustration on Aethersnipe was originally intended for Ingot Chewer. It depicts an elemental of brute force and destructiveness. The illustration on Ingot Chewer was originally intended for Shriekmaw. It depicts an elemental of decomposition and decay. Here are the three cards as they are, and as they could have been. The Beatdown box set printing of Fireball from 2000 is the only Magic card ever printed with Y in its casting cost. Its text box reads like a pop quiz from a middle school algebra class. I don't know exactly what led to Pucatrade's demise, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss what the service promised. Maybe it was mischief, or maybe it was fate. I remember pretty vividly the night the millionth card was traded, and how we all celebrated the milestone. Peter Adkison, founder of Wizards of the Coast, played a character called Alcor in a D&D campaign that spanned nearly 20 years. As the story goes, WotC co-founder Steve Conard designed a Magic card called Alcor's Tome as tribute to his friend's powerful wizard. But a miscommunication error resulted in Alcor's untimely death, and a Magic card that presented some serious mechanical dissonance. There was a time early on in the format when Spell Crumple was a must-include in any EDH deck running blue mana. I was on a run in Superior, Colorado, listening to one of the earliest episodes of the Command Zone podcast when the Tuck rule was banned. I remember feeling like the format had experienced its first real schism, a before and after event. The original oil painting of Sedek, Lord of Secrets, is listed as destroyed on Donato Giancola's website. When pressed for further explanation, the painter told Mike Linneman that he lost track of the image somewhere, that it likely exists beneath another painting, that someone out there has 2 illustrations and one without their knowing. Rather fitting for the former guild leader of the Dimir. If push came to shove and we had to elect a single card to represent Magic the Gathering, the game, and the cultural phenomenon in its totality, I'd vote for Windrake. I think Windrake is a perfect Magic card, the perfect Magic card. I'd put Windrake in a time capsule and send it to space. This card only exists as an artist proof, aside from a few escaped copies. This print was originally used as a Grand Prix promo, but some judge versions of the promo escaped into the wild anyway. Sword of Feast and Famine was intended to be the 2016 GP promo. Stoneforge Mystic was intended to be the 1 of 8 2016 judge promo. Both were printed but not distributed. Due to these last-second decisions, artist Ephraim Palacios still received a batch of artist proofs for his rendition of Sword of Feast and Famine. They have become coveted keepsakes of a mishandling of goods. The full prints with the Magic card back, which I assume were ordered to be destroyed, are now among the game's rarest collectibles. Claws of Gix famously showcases not a painting but a photograph of a neo-primitive sculpture by H.G. Higginbotham. Prior to 2021, this commission and its companion pieces were somewhat of a rarity, but Wizards has incorporated more and more mixed media pieces into the game as of late. Laura Plansker's photo illustrations are particularly charming, and I hope she continues to see more work for Magic. It's long overdue we open the doors to those who paint without brushes. Following complaints about the printing of Griselbrand in Avacyn Restored, R&D has made concerted efforts to draw symmetry between stats, abilities, and mana cost. The real irony of Griselbrand is not that it is a 7/7 that lets you pay 7 to draw 7 for 8 mana, it's that Griselbrand has never, in practice, cost more than 2. It is impossible to fully prove and endlessly fun to argue what is Magic's greatest painting, but Cartographer from Odyssey in 2001 tends to remain the point of comparison for every potential candidate. In an era defined by search engine optimization and online shopping, it is remarkably difficult to find articles or posts discussing the card foil. The same is true for purchasing the card foil in foil. I anticipate the eventual unset printing of non-foil, an anti-counterspell of sorts. My ribs ache from all the preemptive jabs. Carrie Thomas's zine, Players Just Like You, explores the highlights and low points of Gatherer throughout the years of its tenure on the mothership. Reading through Triumph of Ferocity's comments is a sobering reminder of how weird certain subsects of Magic players can be. A group afflicted by some perverse Peter Pan complex, where you never outgrow the perspective of the average suburban 15-year-old boy. Losers, in other words. Prophet of Krufix really is the type of Magic card that says, I don't give a shit about the other players in this commander pod. How do you end a jagged story told in mosaic fragments? The same way we live our stories, through incongruent cards shuffled into decks and drawn one at a time. You end the story with an exclamation point off the top of the library.
In comes Olivia, Simono now, right on the wire.
This is the draw
Someone is about to win the World Magic Cup. Hungary passes the turn.
Just flip it.
Come on then, flip it. That's what they're asking you for. Turn it over. What have you drawn? What is it? What is it? What is it? Rakdos Return! Rakdos Return! And they've done it! The French have done it! That is unbelievable Magic! They've won everything in the game, and now they've won the World Magic Cup.
I'm thrilled to work with a new sponsor this year in Foil Armor by Integra Products, the safest and most effective way to flatten your curled cards. If you watch my video on the history of foils, you'll know that holographic trading cards warp due to differences in humidity between where they were manufactured and where they are now. These two-way humidity control packs fix that, They've been specifically engineered to reset convex and concave cards. The Brina I cured in my previous video is still flat as a pancake, so I repeated the process on this heavily curved prismatic piper in my binder. After just a couple of days in an airtight jar, this card returned to playable form like magic. Do your collection a favor, go to flattenmycards.com and purchase some 8-gram foil armor packs for individual use and some bigger 33-gram packs for long-term storage. Use code STUDIES at checkout for 15% off. Thanks Foil Armor for the support.